He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
If you're driving into Whakatane from, say, Matata or Tauranga, you'll come across the sign. It says, Whakatane, everything under the sun. Well, today, it's not quite sunny. In fact, it's quite miserable. It's raining. But I'm here to find out what Whakatane is all about in this episode of Nau Mai Town. Population just over 37,000. You get the kind of small town vibe of Whakatane here in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. So let's check it out. This is Nau Mai Town. I'm in Whakatane, called Justine Murray, aho. Whakatane, home to beaches, a whare nui that travelled around the world, and a mysterious statue of a lady on a rock, a story we're going to explore shortly. It's a quaint town with hilltop houses and good coffee and kai. People call this town other places as well.
Whakatane, you hear that a lot. I've seen it spelt as Wakatane. And I think those sort of are such an opportunity to teach.
Mark Sykes, he manages Te Wharetaonga o Taketake, the local museum. The name Whakatane is thanks to their ancestor Wairaka, who arrived at this place where I'm standing right now.
So we're at the river mouth where the waka would have come in, where that rock is.
So this rock is Turu where the Mātātua waka came in and was tied to that rock. And that rock's very tapu.
Yes.
And by tapu, Mark means this rock is very sacred to the people of the local iwi Ngāti Awa. Joe Harawira is a storyteller. He's been doing it for a while as part of his job at the Department of Conservation. He's the kaihautu te kotahitanga, and talking about place names is part of his job.
Our Māori place names have stories attached to them, and the stories within those place names are about the things that happened for tangata whenua of those places.
So Joan is going to help us break down the story in bits. Let's start with the ancestor Irakiwa. Of course, this is hundreds of years ago. Now, precisely when? Well, no one's sure, but he was on a scouting trip to Aotearoa.
And he landed at a place we call now Te Kūreitanga o Mātātua, which is along the around the heads, Te Haihanga. And whilst he was here, he surveyed the land, and then he went back to Rarotonga, to his home, and then he talked to his son about bringing the waka, Mātātua, over to Aotearoa.
So while in Rarotonga, Irakiwa told his son Toroa, who would also become the captain of the Mātātua waka, to sail here and look for 3 signs. When he spots them, it's the place to settle his people. So the first sign is a huge rock located in a river mouth. The second is a cave, and the third, cascading waterfalls.
And so those were the tohu that Toroa was looking for in his journeys when he arrived up north and then continued down to finally arrive at the river, or at the place called Kakahoroa at the time. And the story goes that when they found them, they beached the waka, and the men actually went to survey the land.
When the Mātātua waka landed, they tied it around a sacred rock. As we heard earlier, this is Turu rock. Now, the women remained on board, and the water began to shift.
It being a tidal place, of course, the waka started being pulled out to sea. I've heard that women were not to have anything to do with the workings of the waka. Our story is that it was Wairaka, who was the daughter of Toroa, was the one who retrieved the waka, saved the waka from being taken out into the ocean. In order for her to carry out the things that only men do, she uttered the phrase, we are home. Let me act like a man, so that it would cover her to be able to bring the waka back to shore.
So Whakatane was an incantation from Wairaka. If we break it down a bit, whaka meaning to embody or take on the characteristics of something. In this case, Wairaka wanted to embody a man, to have the strength of a man, or tāne. But stories have other versions too, and this one is no exception. Here's Joe Harawira again.
On that waka, Mātātua, there was Toroa, there was his sister Muriwai, and his daughter, Wairaka, his son, Tāne Atua. When they landed at Whakatane, of course, the people got off the waka and they spread out to the different areas around the Bear Plenty. And Te Whakatohea, who were descendants of Muriwai, went, of course, over to the Portsiki area. And according to the stories of Te Whakatohea, it was actually Muriwai who saved the waka.
The waka, not Wairaka.
No, it wasn't Wairaka. And so our stories say it was Wairaka. We acknowledge each other's stories and there's no tension whatsoever.
So Whakatane, the name stuck?
Yeah.
Kia Whakatane au ia hau.
The name stuck is Whakatane.
So it's the Wairaka version of the story that the town's name comes from her incantation to be like a man and save the waka. Now, both these iwi connect to the Mātātua waka. This is also my lineage, being from Tauranga. Actually, there's a waiata called Te Tau o Mātātua. It names all the sites and places in this region. We sing this here in my hometown. Here's a snippet. That is quite a fast-paced waiata, and you may have picked up the name Muriwai in that song. But if it's sung in Whakatane, the word Muriwai is likely to be replaced with Wairaka. And I remember singing the song and thinking, are we saying Muriwai? Is it going to be Wairaka? Because there can be some confusion if you don't know which version of the story the iwi supports. Anyway, that's my own personal experience. Which takes us back to the river mouth. Now, in the distance, there's a bronze statue of Wairaka. I'm back with Mark Sykes. There's a guy in his truck staring at us in the rain. But, that's all good. Kia ora. Kia ora, kia ora. It's kind of drizzly, but that's okay. It's just one of those days here in the Eastern Bay of Plenty.
So we're looking at, is it Wairaka? On the rock at the heads in Whakatane.
Is it?
Is it?
Could be Muriwai, could be
Muriwai, could be Mrs. Sullivan.
Okay, so hang on. Who is Mrs. Sullivan? Well, yeah, there's another variation on the story, that this statue is actually dedicated to the late wife of Sir William Sullivan, former mayor of Whakatane, from 1925 to 1938. Sullivan died in 1967, 2 years after the statue was unveiled. Here's Joe Harawira again.
My sense is that in order to honour his wife, he wanted to build a statue in memory of his wife, but that because of the story of Wairaka, is that name was attached to that particular statue on that rock.
And that's probably the most contentious part, why the statue was allowed to be built on Turuturu Rock. Still, it was 58 years ago.
The pōheri at the time was led by Auntie Mate Harawira. So there was this knowledge, I think, between the iwi of the hapu and his intention of that statue. So it was in memory of his wife, but it was also always meant to be Wairaka.
And back in the day, Mark reckons that people used to do really odd things.
People would go across and put bikinis on her.
Sorry.
Honest, that's what people were doing because of, this was
just idiots would climb the rock with a bikini and put it on because...
just because.
So I'm driving around Whakatane and it's 12:30 lunchtime, and I come up to the sign and this is what it says. drive-thru, $10 hāngī, cream pawa, seafood chowder, kina, raw fish. And I'm looking for lunch. Hi. What are you fellas up to?
We're currently selling hāngī, pawa, seafood via drive-thru, Māori drive-thru.
What's the best thing about Whakatane?
Oh, everything really, just the people, the culture. I enjoy it. It's brought me home from spending years in the city, over 20 years, and now I'm back home enjoying the lifestyle, the rural, everything. Everything, that's all I can say.
Okay, I'm going to take one cream pawa and one seafood chowder, please.
Any fry bread fire?
Oh, I didn't see the fry bread.
Yeah, we got fry bread.
Just 2 fry bread, please. And yes, it was yummy. Next stop is Te Wharetaonga o Taketake, the Whakatane Museum. I'm back with Mark Sykes. Now, while he went to Wellington for a while to work at Te Papa, this area is home.
Whakatane has been built around, well, farming now, of course, but it was built around a lot of industries, and Māori had a big input on those industries because, A, of the manpower that they provided. Kawerau, as you know, big, huge place that all of us, I think, in one stage of our lives have worked in Kawerau.
This is the paper mill.
Paper mill,
Yeah, paper mill.
timber mill.
Yeah. Tasman Pulp and Paper was about half an hour's drive from Whakatane. It employed hundreds of locals. In fact, the town Kawerau was built because of this industry. After 66 years, it closed up in June of 2021. And I promised you the story of a globe-trotting wharenui. Well, this is Mātātua Wharenui, a large meeting house built in Whakatane in 1875. But only a few years later, in 1879, it was dismantled for an exhibition in Sydney and shipped over.
When it got to Sydney, nobody over there knew how to put up a wharenui, and it was erected with all of the tukutuku and carvings facing out, exposed to the weather. It went from Sydney to Melbourne, and then from Melbourne over to London, and finally came back to New Zealand. But that's another story. It went straight down to Otago, and we got it back as part of our treaty settlement. We got it back in 1999. Kora Ching Tutua and some of our carvers began the conservation stuff, recarving and the like, and that now is one of our main attractions.
Mātātua Meeting House, now back home and open to the public. So that's Whakatane, from the words Kia Whakatane o Iaho, spoken by the ancestor Wairaka, whose courage saved a waka and the people who would make the Bay of Plenty their home.
The women were the important people because they were the bearers of future life, whare tangata.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Thanks for listening to Nau Mai Town, written and presented by me, Justine Murray. Executive producer Tim Watkin, engineer William Saunders. Thanks to Mark Sykes and Joe Harawira. Follow Nau Mai Town, that's Naumai Town, on Apple, Spotify or any good podcasting app.